I'd like to thank you for attending this evening. The North Hennepin Area Chamber and the League of Women Voters of Brooklyn Park, Osseo, Maple Grove, and Brooklyn Center are co-sponsoring this candidate forum to encourage voter interest in the upcoming election on November 6th. Neither organization endorses any of the candidates for office. I'd like to thank the City of Brooklyn Center for the use of their facility for this forum and CCX Media for their support in televising this event live and for their scheduling of the cablecast replays. It is now my pleasure to introduce Linda Freeman, representing the League of Women Voters for our area.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I would like to welcome you to tonight's forum. The League of Women Voters is an organization that is nonpartisan and volunteer-based. It is organized at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to participate in government. While the League members do study and take stands on issues, we do not endorse or support political parties or candidates. The League does encourage its members as individuals, as we encourage each of you to get involved in your community and the political party of your choice. However, the views expressed in this forum are those of the individual candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters. By sponsoring this forum this evening, the League provides an opportunity for citizen participation and exposure to candidates, but does not provide an endorsement of any candidate or candidates. All viable candidates were invited to participate this evening. And tonight's forum is for District 40B with State Representative candidates Samantha Maine and Robert Marvin. In tonight's forum, the candidates will start with 4 of the 5 questions they received in advance, which they have 1 minute to respond. Then our candidates will have up to 30 seconds to respond to each of the questions that are coming from the audience. Finally, they will be given 1 minute for the final question that is their final statement. Candidates, the League of Women Voters would like to request that you refrain from making any personal attacks on your fellow candidate. I'd like to take this moment to point out our timekeepers up front here. They will show you when you have 15 seconds to finish your statements, then show you that your time has expired. Please finish your sentence at that time, and I will direct the question to the next speaker's turn. For the audience, please remember to turn off all communication devices at this time. There will be no photography for the duration of the forum. And we will begin with the first question that I will direct to Robert Marvin. Please tell us about your background and previous civic involvement that supports your candidacy for this position.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank Linda Freeman for being the host, and the League of Women Voters and the Northwest Area Chamber of Commerce for hosting this forum. And thanks, Samantha, for attending again. My name is Robert Marvin. I'm running for Minnesota House here in District 40B. My wife and I, Molly Marvin, have raised our children here. We've been here for about 22 years. I've been a very active member of the community. I've been involved with the Boy Scouts, the scouting programs, the Junior Achievement, with lots of other programs. I've been active in my neighborhood, block captain, National Night Out chair, association president, Lake Association president. I've been very active in my profession, including being on a lot of national committees. And I've been an election judge, and I've been on the Charter Commission for more than 8 years. The reason I'm running is because I care about this community, and I'm looking to fight for the people who live here. Thank you.
Samantha.
Thank you, all of you, for attending tonight's event. Thank you, League of Women Voters and Northwest Chambers, for hosting this forum. My name is Samantha Maine. I'm the Democrat and Labor-endorsed candidate for 40B. 25 years ago, my parents arrived to Minnesota with nothing but their clothes on their backs and as refugees of war. Soon they gave birth to me here, and we grew up on public housing and relied on government assistance to get by. Being one of the few in my family to speak English, I grew up having to help my parents navigate through the system and through general life in America. Soon I found myself working directly in diverse communities through nonprofits, campaigns, and through community civic organizing. I've worked at the Capitol advocating for our schools, racial equity, women's rights. I believe we need better opportunities towards quality access towards education, better opportunities towards homeownership, better jobs, and making sure that we have clean water, air, and land. And I hope to build upon the legacy of Representative Deborah Hellstrom that she has left behind as well.
Thank you.
On the next question, we'll start with you again, Samantha Maine. Minnesota's transportation infrastructure is in dire need of funding for repairs and new roads. How would you propose funding road and bridge repairs and new road construction projects over the next 10 years?
Yes, definitely. Minnesota is in dire need of funding our infrastructure. House Republicans have continually underfunded our infrastructure, and we need to make sure that we continue to build sustainable revenue to make sure that we fund and sustain our infrastructure. Governor Mark Dayton has maintained that gas tax and licensee tap fees are some of the key components that we can continue to build sustainable revenue. I'm also all for increasing funds to already existing mechanisms that are already constitutionally dedicated towards funding our roads.
Thank you. Robert. Marvin?
I think there's generally bipartisan consensus that we need to spend more money on roads and bridges. It's one of the core pillars of our government, is our Constitution, is we have the two pillars being education and infrastructure. I basically don't believe that the government is, the problem with the government is they spend too much. It's not so much of a revenue issue. I'm not in favor of necessarily raising the gas taxes and license tab fees just because we can. We had a big surplus last time around, and I think we have ways that we can fund the roads and bridges, just like we did 2 years ago with redirecting funding from sales tax revenue and so forth that we did 2 years ago. There's also a lot of ways to increase funding for roads and bridges by trying to keep spending from various other sources from raiding that fund, which is the constitutional source. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, and we'll start with you again, Robert. Do you support further reduction in taxes for residents and businesses? Why or why not? If so, which taxes do you want to see reduced?
Well, I generally think that, here in Brooklyn Center, that we're the highest, one of the very highest taxed cities in Hennepin County, and I think that we're taxed too much. So generally speaking, I think that we need to work on our tax rates and lowering our tax rates. Just generally, Minnesota is one of the higher tax cities, or one of the higher tax states, and we need to be competitive. As far as how I would do that, what was the question again?
Do you support further reduction in taxes for residents and businesses? Why
Yes.
or why not?
Yep.
And if so, which taxes do you want to see reduced?
I'm generally, I don't want to increase taxes. I'm not in favor of just, whenever there's more spending required, raising taxes. As far as property taxes, I think that we have very high problems with property taxes. And I also think that our general taxes are too high. So I would generally be inclined to lower most of them.
Okay, and Samantha?
I believe in a fair tax system that is equitable and that it's also based on people's ability to pay. When we talk about taxes, there's always going to be some winners and some losers, but it is our job to make sure that we get the most winners and the least losers. And I believe that this past session, House Republicans has failed to do that, where a lot of the benefits seem to fall upon wealthy families and corporations rather than on the benefits of those who need it the most, which are our working class families and our middle class families. So I will be all for a fair tax system where it goes towards benefiting the most, which is to our working class families and middle class families.
Thank you. Next question, and we'll start with you again, Samantha Maine. Do you support free all-day pre-kindergarten for every 4-year-old in the state? Why or why not? If so, how would you like to see this delivered? Exclusively through public schools, through a mix of public schools and private schools, child care centers, using state-provided scholarships, etc.?
Yes, I support expanding all-day pre-kindergarten. Studies have consistently shown that investment in early childhood development is one of the key significant indicators of student success in the academics in a school in the long run. And we have a large achievement gap in our state, and I believe this is one of the key ways to close that achievement gap. we are in need for quality permanent teachers, as well as encouraging a learning environment for our young learners, and that should be the basis of any entity delivering these services.
Thank you. Robert Marvin?
I'm not so sure that pre-kindergarten is really that beneficial to all students. A lot of people who have issues like with ESL and who are from disadvantaged families and so forth, I think benefit a lot from that. I think it's really important, but I'm not so convinced that everybody needs to be in pre-kindergarten and even in these pre-kindergartens. I think it's really important for families to be stepping up and raising their kids, and developing the family is really, really important. As far as delivery of these services, I think it should be a mix, not just necessarily public schools, but I think it's important to be working on educating your kids as they're growing up. My wife and I felt it was really important to send our kids to all-day kindergarten, so we made sure to pick a school that had all-day kindergarten for our kids, and we sent them there. But as far as having education specifically in like a formal setting, prior to kindergarten, I'm not so convinced it's critical to everybody. I think it does benefit certain groups, and I think it could lower the achievement gaps in those groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we are going to transfer to questions from the audience, so you'll have 30 seconds to answer those. And we'll start with you, Robert Marvin. Charter cities like Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center have the option to consider ranked choice voting for local municipal elections, but other cities don't have that option. Would you support a local options bill to allow cities to make that choice for themselves?
Well, I guess I really don't know too much about how Minneapolis did that. I know ranked choice voting is being used in Minneapolis, so I guess I'm on the Charter Commission, so if they were looking to do something like that, I'd be more than happy to go through the discussions of that with the Charter Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. And Samantha?
Yeah, I can see the benefits of ranked choice voting, as it gives people more of an option to make choices of who they like and what will they like to happen. But I can also see a con that for communities who struggle to vote have a hard time understanding what ranked choice voting is, and so I can see that as a learning curve for other communities who don't often go out to vote as well.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Samantha Maine. Do you support the 1 penny per pill opioid tax? Why or why not?
That is actually an issue I'm not too aware about, but I do know that prescription drugs are getting too costly for our families. And so I'm all for making sure that looking at comprehensive solutions at how can we able to regulate those prices so that companies don't exploit families from relying on these drugs.
Thank you. And Robert Marvin?
I guess I haven't heard about the 1 penny per pill tax necessarily either, but to me that's not a huge amount of tax because a lot of times a bottle of pills is like 60, so you're talking 60 cents per bottle. I'm generally, though, opposed to just taxing things for no reason. The opioid crisis here is very, very big, and in working on the opioid crisis and working on that is very important. So I think it's a really important thing for us to be working on. Whether or not we get a 60 cents per bottle taxes doesn't to me help that much.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Robert. Do you support an amendment to the state constitution that states only human beings have rights and not corporations or other organizations? Why or why not?
Well, I guess I was having a discussion about that here before the forum. To me, I guess they were talking about whether or not they can lobby and spend money and so forth. But to me, everybody has rights, even people who are not citizens. I actually think people who aren't even born yet have rights. So to me, I'm not against corporations having rights. I'm not against people having rights. I'm not against visitors from other countries having rights. And this idea of anybody not having rights doesn't seem right to me.
Thank you. Samantha?
Can you repeat the question again?
Do you support an amendment to the state constitution that states only human beings have rights and not corporations or other organizations? Why or why not?
Yes, I believe corporations have too much influence in the state of our politics. I'm proud to say that before the primaries, my campaign was funded through just the people, entirely through small contributions and through neighbors, community members. I had no PAC monies or any organizational monies, and we were able to fundraise nearly $20,000 just from the community. And I believe this is a people-powered campaign, and it should stay within the people.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you again, Samantha. Tell us about a place in your district that you have not visited yet, but would like to visit before the election.
That's a very good question. Well, I would like to visit a place that is like the global Midtown Market, like they have in South Minneapolis. I would like to see that here in the city of Brooklyn Center or in our district. I believe that we need a place where the community can gather, where they can have coffee, where they can get their hair cut and whatnot. And that used to be what Brookdale Mall was. And I want to see a place like a Midtown Global Market here, especially to serve our diverse communities and to bring a place of gathering for everyone. And I hope to see that after the elections.
Thank you, Robert.
I guess for me, I've run for office before. This isn't my first rodeo, you know. I've basically walked on every street in Brooklyn Center. I've pretty much knocked on every door in Brooklyn Center. You know, a lot of campaigns have done that kind of thing. So this idea of visiting some place that you haven't been before is tough if you've been basically everywhere. But I think having some vision of having, you know, development here and having really good, big, you know, improvements in the city would be really great. I'd love to be able to see development on all these blighted properties put up, and I'd love to see, you know, some really nice stuff going up, and I'd like to be able to visit that sometime in the future.
Thanks. And next question, we'll start with you again, Robert. If elected, how will you help facilitate bipartisan compromise?
Well, one of the things you might not know, as far as I'm a Republican, and you know, and I talk to everybody. I don't care who they are. I'll talk to everybody, and even within the Republican Party, a lot of times I'll talk to the various factions. You know, like for example, I was photographed with Tim Pawlenty back prior to the primary, and it's just part of the deal. You talk to everybody. You know, I got my wife and I. We had photos with Tim Waltz, and at the State Fair booth, and they were trying. He was giving us their nonpartisan cookies from Grandma's. You know, and that's what you do. You just go out there and work with everybody. And it's not a war. You're not always at war with people. And 90% of the time, people basically agree on stuff. So you got to work bipartisan. Thank you.
Samantha?
Yeah, I will always keep an open door policy. First, I will like start with bipartisan issues, issues like education and healthcare. Those are things that we want to see get work done. I think that when it comes down to, it's more of an issue of accountability. And I think the last session, House Republicans has failed on those bipartisan issues, and we need to look at how can we hold one another accountable as well.
Thank you. And next question, we'll start with you, Samantha. Will you support an all-renewable ASAP energy policy to move Minnesota to a 100% clean energy economy as quickly as possible?
Climate change is real. I think it's still unbelievable that there are folks who don't believe climate change exists. I think it's really important that we make sure future generations are still able to prosper from our lands and from our resources. Minnesota is known as the land of 10,000 lakes for our parks and our forests and our rivers, and it's really important that we continue to make sure future generations thrive from that. And so I do support renewable energy.
Thank you. Robert?
I'm an electrical engineer. I've worked on practically every kind of power project that you can think of. I never worked on nuclear, but I worked on hydro plants. I worked on all kinds of renewable stuff, wind, solar. I've generated electricity off of biofuels, off of biogas, off of landfill gas, you name it. I very much advocate the idea of generating electricity and reusing things like, you know, waste products and so forth, wind projects, solar projects. But as far as the idea of mandating the idea that Minnesota has to go all 100% green or 100% renewable, I don't advocate for that. I basically think market forces should be involved in that. I'm really proud of all the projects that I've worked on that did generate electricity off of green sources, geothermal, you name it. But I wouldn't advocate for forcing the utilities because it would increase utility costs enormously.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you again, Robert. How do you plan to reach out to seniors in your district?
Well, reaching out to seniors is really simple. You put your hand out there and you shake their hand. That's what I do. I knock on everybody's door. I talk to everybody. And it doesn't make any difference to me who they are, where they live. I'll reach out to everybody. And I talk to them and I listen to them about the issues and the things that they're concerned about.
Thank you. Samantha?
I think it's really important to meet people where they're at. And if seniors tend to have the most issues around transportation and other health issues. And so I will always take initiative to meet people where they're at, and wherever they would like to meet, I will also always be upfront to meet with them too.
Thank you. Samantha, well, both of you, but we'll start with Samantha. What do you think about the tax cuts that were given to the wealthiest taxpayers in Minnesota?
Yeah, like I said before, a fair tax system is that I believe in is where it goes to benefits those who need it the most, which is our working class and middle class families, rather than those who are wealthy and are corporations. So I am disappointed at the House Republicans for failing to meet those needs of those who need it the most. Thank you.
And Robert?
Well, I guess I don't like to put anybody in boxes and say that I hate somebody just because they're wealthy. I like the idea of tax cuts going to everybody, not just certain groups. And then just having tax cuts specifically for wealthy people, I would be opposed to. Generally speaking, I think the tax cuts should go to everybody. I think that we should be fiscally responsible, be very, very careful stewards of the people's money. But basically, as far as wealthy people, I think it's everybody wants to be wealthy, and we all want to move our way up. And to me, I don't hate anybody just because of what they are.
Thank you. And next question, we'll start with you, Robert. How would you like to see the state support health care?
Well, as far as health care goes, my sister, for example, is a nurse. I was even in a picket line with the Minnesota Nurses Association, which is something that's unusual for me to do. But I like my sister a lot. But as far as healthcare go, I think it's really important for us to be supporting healthcare. My guess is the question really has to do with insurance. And to me, I think we need to work on markets and opening up competition and quit requiring so many mandates on how you do your insurance so that people can basically buy what they need. And as far as the healthcare itself goes, I really want to make sure that we're supporting quality healthcare here in our state because really we have some of the best in the entire country. Thank you.
Thank you. Samantha?
I believe the state's responsibility to make sure that healthcare is a right to people, not to those who can just afford healthcare. We gotta, our drug prescriptions are getting too overpriced for families to afford it. We have families that are worried about affording a simple doctor's visit, and so I am all for looking at comprehensive solutions to make sure that healthcare remains affordable and that's quality for all Minnesotans.
Thank you. And we have our last question from the audience. And we'll start with you, Samantha. What is your position on the Met Council? Should it be abolished, changed, or left alone?
I think it should be left alone. The Met Council was established to coordinate services and to provide a regional outlook for the state of Minnesota. They were established because local cities and officials wasn't able to do a coordinated responsibility for the region. And so the Met Council serves that regional role, and I think it's really important to make sure that they are there because they are key to our infrastructure, and without them, it will actually paralyze our transportation system here.
Thank you, Robert.
I basically think Met Council here started off with there was a good reason for it, because we did need to have some central organization for our sewer systems, and there were some other services that there was a need for it. But basically, I don't believe that the government is the solution to everything. I also don't believe people are so stupid that they can't figure out things on their own. I think local government are able to figure things out. But basically, I think that Met Council, for the most part, should be busted up into the various functions that it serves. There's about 4 different functions that Met Council legitimately serves. And I think that it should be broken up into those groups. And then as far as the scope of it, I think it should be dramatically reduced, because I think for the most part, local government is better suited for dealing with whether, like for example, development in the city here. I think the city council is better suited for making those decisions and not being forced by Met Council to do all these various things mandated by them.
Thank you. And now we will go to the closing question that you'll have 1 minute to answer, and we'll start with you, Robert. In summary, how do you intend to best serve your district and move the state forward?
Well, thanks a lot. This has been a great conversation, and thanks a lot for Samantha coming. Thanks for you guys hosting this forum. Basically, as far as me moving the state forward, I'm basically wanting to represent Minnesota, the people here in Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park. I want to continue the conversations and talk to the people here, and I want to listen to the people here, and I want to find out what people want, and I basically just want to represent you guys, and I want to look out for the interests of Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, and that's why I'm asking for your vote here in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Samantha?
Thank you, all of you, and thank you, Robert. I have grown up around this community. I have a family of educators in our schools. We're homeowners and union members. I graduated from Osseo High School and became the first in my family to graduate from college at Gustavus Adolphus. I've worked directly in this community through nonprofits, local campaigns, and building local coalitions. And I believe I will bring a people-powered voice to the Capitol. And with my local roots and your support, I believe we will bring a reflective voice to 40B.
Thank you. Once again, on behalf of the League of Women Voters and the North Hennepin Chamber of Commerce, I would like to thank the candidates for agreeing to participate in tonight's forum. I would also like to thank the voters for attending and participating by submitting excellent questions. And I'd also like to thank the viewing audience as well. Remember that if we could not get to your question tonight, or if you have any further questions for the candidate, we invite you to contact them directly with your concerns. Please remember to get out and vote on November 6th, as your vote truly does count. Thanks, and have a great evening.